That shiny network deal might look like your big break, but if you don't read the fine print, it could be your biggest mistake. Today, today we're digging into a podcast network contracts, what they should say, what they shouldn't, and what to do before you sign. So let's go. All right. Hey there. It's Gordon Firemark, the podcast lawyer. And this is Legit Podcast Pro, the show that helps you build a podcast business that stands strong legally and thrives financially. If you're thinking about joining a podcast network, or maybe you've already been approached with an offer, this episode is mandatory viewing before you sign anything. Or listening if you're on the audio version, of course. Network deals can offer some real perks, but they also come with serious pitfalls. I'm going to walk you through exactly what your agreement should include, what to watch out for, and how to make sure your podcast doesn't get boxed into a deal that stifles your growth. So let's start with why people get excited about joining a podcast network. Most podcasters are looking for one or more of these things: help monetizing the show through ad sales or sponsorships, or production support and editing and hosting. Maybe it's better exposure and promotion, or cross-promotion with other shows on the same network. And it could be a sense of community and credibility. And hey, all of those are good things, but they often come at a price, literally and contractually. So let's dig into what your podcast network agreement should say and where to be extra careful. First off, ownership of the content. This is a big one. Who owns the episodes that you create? The brand, the intellectual property. If you're creating and funding the show yourself, there should be no question you own the content. The network might get a limited license to distribute and promote it, but ownership should remain with you. But what if the network or a production company that's affiliated with them is footing the bill for the production? Well, that may change things. If they are investing real money and resources, it is reasonable for them to want a stake in the show. But here's what needs to find its way into the contract if that's the case. If the network cancels or ends the show, well, they should relinquish their ownership interest so you can continue it elsewhere if you want to. A fair financial approach might be to have a buyout clause somehow based on a percentage of the future revenue over a period of time. That way you keep the show alive without being tied to a dead deal. Whatever the setup, make sure that ownership and exit strategies are clearly spelled out. Ambiguity here can cost you big down the line. Licensing and usage rights is another thing. Are you giving the network exclusive rights to your content? Can they use your name and likeness and show artwork in their marketing? Can they sublicense your episodes to other platforms without your permission? Make sure the license you grant is as limited in scope as possible and in time, and that it ends when your deal does. And then there's the revenue side of things. How is the revenue from ads and sponsors going to be split? And what about sponsors that you bring in? Do you get a flat fee per ad, a percentage, a combination? Is there a different percentage for the stuff you bring versus what the network finds? And here's something I see way too often. Some networks include a clause that says basically, we'll pay you after we get paid by the sponsor. But then the thing is, lots of these networks don't even really try to collect promptly. They'll send an invoice and just wait. So that leaves you waiting sometimes forever, and that is unacceptable. I had one client a few years ago who came to me because they were all owed several $100,000 in full advertising that they had fulfilled and were never paid for. They'd fulfilled the ad insertion order, they should have been paid, regardless of when or whether the sponsor paid the network. So make sure your contract says the payment to you is due upon fulfillment of the ad placement, not upon network receipt of funds. In my view, this should be a non-negotiable point for serious podcasters, but occasionally you see someone who will say, well, if they promise to at least try to collect, then, we'll give them a period of time. But I would say never more than like 90 days after the fulfillment, you got to get paid. Another point to think about is the creative control. Who gets final say on the content, on who your guests are, your episode release schedule? I mean, if it's your show, you should retain full creative control. And some networks will try to require editorial input or approval. Unless you're being hired to host a show that they own, well, that should be a little bit of a red flag for you. Yes, they want to make sure you're consistent with their theme and their network ideas, but it should be a air your episode or not kind of a approval at best. All right. Now make sure that you can leave if you need to. The term and termination of your contract is an important thing to consider. Look for a fair clause that lets you walk away without jumping through lots of flaming hoops. Avoid automatic renewals unless you have a clear way to opt out during that last 30 or 60 days before the renewal. And marketing and promotion. A lot of creators assume the network will help to promote their show, and maybe they will, but what does the contract actually require them to do? Are they promising a specific number of cross promotions, social media pushes, newsletter features, or are they only committing to, best efforts or worse, reasonable efforts, which basically means we'll try, but there are no guarantees. So make sure that your expectations are backed up by the contract. And if not, well, do your own promotion as well, but don't look beyond the contract as how you're going to get the network to do their part. All right. What about exclusivity? Some network deals are exclusive, meaning that you can't distribute your show elsewhere or even work on other shows outside the network. Now, that might work for some people, but for most creators, exclusivity is something to avoid unless it comes with a significant upside for you. And if the network owns any of the IP or has control over your voice or likeness, you could be locking yourself out of other opportunities down the line. Now, here's what I don't want to see in your network agreement: perpetual or irrevocable rights to your content, overly broad language like "in all media now known or hereafter devised," no termination clause or extreme penalties for leaving before the term ends, hidden deductions before you get your revenue share. Go over the costs and expenses breakdown very carefully if there's any kind of a net participation kind of a thing, or if they're taking anything off the top before the split of revenues. Make sure you are clear on what's there and that nothing is unreasonable. No clear accounting or payment schedule is another one, and that "we pay when we get paid" language without any kind of accountability for not doing the collection work. And if any of these things show up, don't be afraid to push back or walk away. So here's what I recommend before signing anything. Get it reviewed by a lawyer who understands podcasting. Ask questions. Vague language is really the biggest red flag. Document verbal promises. If it's not in writing, it didn't happen. And negotiate. Even smaller shows have leverage when they understand their value and how it relates to the overall of the deal. So here's the bottom line. Read every word or have someone like myself do it for you. Think long term. A bad contract can hold you back. Know your rights and protect your show. And don't let flattery override your business sense. Joining a podcast network can be great, but only if the agreement respects you and what you've been building. Before you sign with a network or any partner, make sure you understand the business and legal landscape that you're entering. I've put together a free on-demand legal and business affairs training for podcasters just like you, folks that are ready to grow their shows, protect what they're building, and achieve real impact, influence, and income, all without shelling out the big bucks for the lawyers. Watch it now over at podcastertraining.com. And that's it for this week on Legit Podcast Pro. I'm Gordon Firemark, the podcast lawyer. I'll see you next time with a special episode about the economic stuff that's going on with us right now and how that might affect the creator economy. So I'll see you soon. Thanks.